My friends all agree. You're just not impressive enough for someone like me. I could do better. The words landed in the bedroom while I was folding his shirts. Those exact shirts I'd bought for him last month when he complained his wardrobe looked tired for client meetings. His voice carried that tone I'd started recognizing in year 4 of our marriage, the one that sounded like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. He stood near the window, backlit by evening sun, looking at me with an expression somewhere between pity and irritation. I stopped mid-fold, the fabric wrinkled under my fingers. For maybe 3 full seconds, I waited for him to laugh, to say he was joking, to take it back. He didn't. He just kept looking at me with those same eyes that used to make me feel like the only person worth seeing in any room. Now they made me feel like furniture. Then do it, I said. He blinked. His mouth opened slightly, closed again. I could see him recalibrating, waiting for the version of me he'd watched crumble before when his words landed hard, but something in me had already gone quiet and still. I folded the last shirt, placed it in the drawer, and walked out of that room without looking back. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd already started making calls. Before we go any further into what happened next, leave a comment below telling me where you're from and what you would have done in my place. Hit that subscribe button because what comes next gets wilder than you'd expect. My name is Calla. I'm 32, born in a city where old money doesn't announce itself, and families like mine learned centuries ago that silence holds more power than showmanship. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a highway accident when I was 9. She taught me 2 languages, 3 instruments, how to read financial statements before I read novels, and one unbreakable rule: never let anyone see the full picture of who you are, unless they've earned it. She died 3 months before I met him. Pneumonia came fast and brutal, took her in 11 days. When the will cleared, I inherited everything. Rental properties scattered across 2 cities, bonds she'd collected since the 1960s, a private storage facility venture that generated income I didn't even need to track. The lawyers said the portfolio was worth somewhere between 8 and 12 million depending on market conditions. Old money. Quiet money. The kind people don't discuss at parties or post about online. Her final letter sat in my wallet for months. 2 sentences in her perfect handwriting. Stay invisible. The moment people know, they'll want a piece. I'd planned to follow that advice. Then I met someone in a coffee shop who made me laugh, and I thought maybe being invisible didn't have to mean being alone. The first time I saw him, he was arguing with a barista about coffee being served too hot, using that confident charm that made even the annoyed barista smile by the end. He turned to me 30 seconds later with that same charm aimed directly at my face and said, "You're having a terrible day. Let me buy you something that'll fix it." He was completely wrong. I'd just closed a property deal that would net me $40,000 by the end of the month, but I let him buy me tea anyway because, when he smiled at me, he looked at me like I was the answer to some question he'd been asking forever. His name was something unremarkable that fit him perfectly. He worked in sales, drove a beaten sedan, lived in a cramped studio that smelled like radiator heat and ambition. He talked about his future like it was a sure thing, like success was just around the corner waiting for him to arrive. I liked that he didn't ask me what I did. I liked that he talked about his dreams instead of interrogating mine. I liked that he paid for my tea with crumpled bills from his jacket pocket and didn't seem embarrassed about it. We dated for 8 months before he proposed in that same coffee shop, getting down on one knee with a ring he'd saved for in a box that looked more expensive than the ring itself. I said yes, because I loved him, because he made me feel like someone who could be normal, could be ordinary, could be just a woman in love instead of a woman carrying generations of wealth she never asked for. When we married, I told him about the inheritance, just not the scale of it. I said my grandmother had left me some properties and bonds, enough that I could manage them instead of working a traditional job. He nodded, kissed my forehead, said that was beautiful, said he'd take care of us both. He meant it. I could see he meant it. The apartment came first. We'd been married 8 months, still living in his cramped studio where we could hear the neighbors arguing through walls thin as paper. I found the place during one of my afternoon walks. Corner unit, 5th floor, huge windows that let in light the way. He always said he wanted. It cost me $400,000. I put both our names on the deed because I wanted him to feel like we were building something together, like this life was ours, not just mine. I told him my uncle, fictional, convenient, had left me more than expected. He cried when I showed him the keys. Real tears ran down his face while he stood in the empty living room talking about filling it with our future, about making me proud of what we'd build there together. I believed him. I wanted to believe him so badly I ignored the voice in my head that sounded like my grandmother warning me about visibility, about showing too much. The car came next. 10 months later. A lease return. Barely driven. Practically pristine if you knew where to look and who to ask. The dealership manager's family had been renting one of my properties for 15 years. One phone call, one favor exchanged, and I got it for a price that looked like luck instead of connections. I told him I'd won it in a radio contest. He posted about it constantly that first month. 17 separate photos, captions about good things happening to good people, about lucky breaks and gratitude. It felt good watching him happy. It felt like love, like I was doing what partners do, making each other's lives better, smoother, fuller. He never asked questions about where things came from because in his mind, good things just happened. They always had. He was that kind of person, born under a lucky star, always landing on his feet, always assuming the universe bent toward him. Year 3 arrived, and he got promoted to senior sales. Started traveling more, attending networking events, coming home with stories about colleagues whose partners ran startups or published books, or did something he could brag about at company dinners. That's when the questions started. "What do you do all day?" he asked one morning, while I was reviewing contracts for a commercial property refinancing at the kitchen counter. His tie was crooked. His coffee mug left water rings I'd wipe up after he left. "I manage things," I said, looking up at him. "Keep our life running smooth." He kissed my forehead in that distracted way people do when they're already thinking about their next sentence. "I know. I just mean, don't you want to do something that's yours? Something bigger?" The question sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't quite swallow. Year 4. The comments started arriving in smaller, sharper doses. "You should dress up more when we go out with my work people. Did you hear about my colleague's wife? She just launched a consulting business. It's great that you're home, but don't you ever think about contributing differently?" I was paying 70% of our monthly expenses through carefully constructed explanations. My investments did well. Some stock dividends came through. Remember that rental property I mentioned? He never asked for specifics. Never wanted to see statements or paperwork or proof. He just accepted that money appeared when needed, the same way he accepted that good parking spots opened up right when he needed them. Year 5, he started staying late at work more often, coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't the brand I bought him, taking phone calls in the bathroom with the door locked and the shower running for noise cover. I didn't confront him. I just watched. And I funded a vacation to the Maldives that I told him I'd won through a timeshare points error that worked in our favor. We took sunset photos on white sand beaches. He posted them with captions about living his best life, about being grateful for his incredible wife. Standing there watching him pose for the perfect shot, I realized something that made my throat tight. He didn't actually see me anymore. He saw what I looked like in photos he could share. He saw the background character in his life story. But me, the actual person, the woman who'd built everything around him, I'd disappeared somewhere along the way. The dinner party happened in year 6, 2 months before everything shattered. His idea, his guest list, his catered food that I arranged, and his wine selection that I paid for. 6 couples sitting around our dining room, the room in the apartment I'd bought, drinking and laughing and talking about success. His college roommate held court most of the night. Name was something generic that fit his aggressive confidence. He'd launched a commercial real estate consultancy 2 years earlier, and it had taken off in ways that made him insufferable. 8 new clients this quarter, he announced, raising his glass, including that storage facility chain, expanding into the Northeast. My storage facility chain, the one my grandmother had invested in decades ago, the one I'd connected him to 18 months earlier when he came to me desperate, when his consultancy was hemorrhaging money, and he was 3 months from bankruptcy, and couldn't tell anyone, especially not my husband, his best friend who thought he was invincible. I'd given him $200,000, not a loan, a gift, with one condition: never tell anyone where it came from. "Why would you do this?" he'd asked, holding the check like it might vanish if he breathed wrong. "Because he loves you," I said simply, "and he needs to believe someone in his life is untouchably successful. Let him have that. That money saved him. He hired the right people, made the right moves, landed the clients that made him look like a visionary, including my storage facility connection. One phone call to the CEO, a man who'd known my grandmother since the 70s. My husband sat beside me at that dinner party, his hand on my knee under the table, proud and vicarious. Marcus is absolutely killing it. Some people just have the instinct, you know? They see opportunities everywhere. I smiled, sipped wine, said nothing. Later, after, everyone left, he stood at the window of our apartment, the one I'd bought, and said quietly, "I want that." What he has. That kind of success people can actually see. "You have success," I said. He turned to me with an expression somewhere between pity and frustration. "I mean real success. The kind that actually matters." That was 3 weeks before the bedroom, before the shirt folding, before the words that split everything open. After I walked out of that room, after I said, "Then do it," he blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. But I'd already made up my mind about something. I was done being invisible for someone who couldn't see me anyway. He moved out 3 days later, packed 2 suitcases, said he needed space to think, said maybe this separation would help us both grow into better versions of ourselves. I helped him pack, folded his shirts carefully one last time, didn't cry even though part of me wanted to. He went to stay with his best friend, the one with the consultancy success, the one who still didn't know where his miracle money had come from. The first call came from building management 5 days after he left. The maintenance fee, $17,000 annually, was overdue. Not actually overdue, just due, but I'd stopped paying it. He called me, confused but not yet worried. "Hey, there's some kind of billing issue with the apartment. Can you handle it real quick? I'm selling it," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost distant. "You have 30 days to clear out your things." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "What are you talking about? This is our home. Check the deed," I said. "It was always mine. I put your name on it because I thought we were building something together. We're not anymore." He hung up, called back 2 minutes later, frantic now, voice pitched higher. "You can't just do this." I already did. The car went next. I contacted the dealership manager. Same family connection, same relationship built over years of reliability. Explained I'd be returning it early. No penalties given our circumstances and history. My husband called me, screaming. Actually screaming, voice cracking with panic. "What is happening?" "You told me to work on being more impressive," I said quietly. "I'm starting by removing the things that were never actually yours." For 11 days, he stayed with his best friend. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was telling people I'd had some kind of breakdown, that the separation was revealing my true character, that he was seeing things clearly for the first time. He told them I was being vindictive, petty, trying to hurt him because I couldn't handle being left. What he didn't know, what nobody except one person knew, was that 2 years earlier, his best friend had come to me in absolute desperation, showed up at our apartment while my husband was traveling for work, hands shaking, face gray with panic. His consultancy was hemorrhaging money faster than he could hide it, 3 months from total bankruptcy. He couldn't tell anyone, especially not my husband, the person who believed in him more than anyone else in the world. "I need help," he'd said, standing in our entryway, looking like he might collapse. "I don't know where else to go." I'd written him a check for $200,000, sat at our kitchen counter, filled it out in blue ink, handed it to him with one single condition. "Never tell anyone where this came from," I said. "Why are you doing this?" His voice broke on the question. "Because he loves you. Because watching you succeed makes him happy. Let him keep that. That money rebuilt everything." He hired competent people, made strategic moves, landed clients that transformed his reputation from struggling to visionary, including my storage facility connection. One simple phone call to a CEO who'd known my grandmother for decades, who owed our family more favors than he could count. My husband's best friend built his entire success story on my money and my connections, and my husband never knew. On day 12 of the separation, I called him. "The best friend? Not my husband. I need you to tell him," I said. "No greeting, no small talk. Tell him what?" But his voice already understood. "Where the money came from? The money that saved you? The connections that built you?" Silence stretched for so long. I thought he might have hung up, then quietly, desperately, "Please don't make me do this." "I'm not making you. I'm giving you a choice. Tell him yourself, or I tell him tomorrow night at dinner in front of everyone who thinks you're self-made. He'll hate me, maybe, but he'll hate me more for making him look stupid. Your call. I hung up, waited, knew exactly how it would unfold because I'd spent 6 years watching how these men operated, how they protected their egos, how they'd burn any bridge to avoid looking weak. The phone call came at 4 in the morning. His best friend's name lit up my screen in the darkness of my new bedroom. Smaller apartment, less light, wholly mine. We were drinking, he said immediately, voice shaking so hard I could hear it through the phone. He wouldn't stop talking. Wouldn't stop going on about what you were doing to him, how you were trying to destroy him out of spite because you couldn't handle being left. So I told him about the money, about the storage facility connection, about all of it. I said nothing, just listened. He's sitting on my couch right now, hasn't moved in 2 hours, just staring at his phone. He tried calling you 60 times tonight. Please, you need to talk to him. Let me talk to him, I said. Rustling sounds, movement, heavy breathing, then his voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it in 6 years of marriage. I didn't know. You never asked. How was I supposed to know you had money like that? You never acted like, what? Like someone impressive enough for you? Silence filled the line like water rising. The apartment, I continued, my voice steady and cold. The car, the vacations I supposedly won, the comfortable life you thought just materialized around you like magic. That was me, managing things, keeping our life running. The exact thing you told me wasn't enough. I didn't mean, you did. You meant every single word. You looked at me folding your shirts in the bedroom of the home I bought and saw someone small, someone unimpressive, someone you could do better than. So now I'm stepping out of your story completely. Tomorrow, my name goes public as the primary investor in the arts center downtown, the one that's been anonymous for 2 years. Next week, there's a profile running in the business journal about women in private equity. By next month, I'll be exactly what you said I wasn't. I want to fix this, he whispered. Please, I want to fix this. You can't, because you never actually saw me. You saw a background character in your life, someone who existed to make you comfortable, and I let you. That's on me. But I'm done now. I hung up before he could respond. The profile ran 3 weeks later. Photo of me wearing my grandmother's pearls, the ones worth more than most people's houses. Headline read, "The Invisible Investor, How One Woman Built an Empire in Silence." The journalist had been easy to convince once I started talking. Told her everything. The inherited wealth, the properties, the strategic investments, the deliberate choice to stay anonymous. Told her about my grandmother's advice to stay invisible. About meeting a man who made me think maybe I didn't have to hide. Told her what happened when I tried to be ordinary. Didn't mention his name. Didn't need to. Anyone in our social circle would recognize the story immediately. The interview requests started within hours. Investment opportunities, charity boards, networking events, speaking, engagements. People wanted to know about my portfolio, my strategy, my vision. Wanted to photograph me, quote me, put my face on things. My phone wouldn't stop. Messages from people I'd met once at dinner parties, from old university acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in a decade, from distant relatives who suddenly remembered we were family. Everyone wanted something, a meeting, an introduction, money, advice, access. I hated it. Not the success itself. I'd been successful in silence for years, but the visibility felt like walking around without skin. Every conversation became an assessment. Every introduction carried expectation. Every smile made me wonder what they wanted. My grandmother had warned me, but I'd thought she meant people would want my money. She meant they'd want pieces of me, bits of my attention, slivers of my time, drops of my energy. Being visible meant being consumed. He called 1 week after the profile ran. I almost didn't answer. "I've been in therapy," he said. No preamble. "Trying to understand why I couldn't see you. And? My therapist says I was threatened by you. That on some level, I knew you were extraordinary, and it terrified me. So I convinced myself you were less. That you were lucky to have me instead of the truth. Your therapist is right. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I want you to know. I see you now." Finally, I looked out the window of my new apartment. Smaller than the old one, less impressive, but completely mine. The problem is that I spent 6 years making myself invisible because I loved you, because I wanted you to love me for me, not for what I had. And you spent 6 years confirming that invisible was exactly where I belonged. So now I'm visible again, and I realize I don't want you to see me anymore. I don't want to exist in your line of sight at all. I'm sorry, he said, and he was crying. Real tears I could hear through the phone. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, but sorry doesn't rebuild what you destroyed. It just makes you feel better about the wreckage. He kept calling after that. Once a day for 2 weeks. Then, once every few days. Then, once a week. I never answered. Let them go to voicemail. Deleted them without listening. His best friend called too. Apologizing, explaining, begging me to understand he never meant to hurt anyone. I blocked his number after the 3rd message. But the real situation was still unfolding in ways they couldn't see yet. Ways I'd set in motion weeks before that bedroom conversation, before the words that split everything apart. The arts center I'd funded anonymously for 2 years was preparing for its grand opening. My name was on it now. Primary investor, board member, visible presence. The director called me weekly with updates, with gratitude that felt genuine but exhausting. The storage facility chain was expanding. The CEO, the man who'd known my grandmother, wanted me on the advisory board, said my insight would be invaluable, said the family legacy deserved recognition. Recognition. That word kept appearing everywhere. People wanted to recognize me, celebrate me, honor me. They wanted me visible, elevated, impressive. Everything my husband said he wanted. And I was miserable. Not because of the work. I'd been doing this work in silence for years, and loved it. But because now it came with performance, with presence, with the constant weight of being watched and assessed and measured. My grandmother's letter sat in my wallet still. Stay invisible. The moment people know, they'll want a piece. She'd been protecting me, not from people taking my money. I had lawyers and accountants and structures for that. She'd been protecting me from people taking pieces of my soul, my time, my peace, from turning my life into performance. I'd given that up for 6 years with him, made myself invisible in a different way, small instead of hidden, diminished instead of protected, and, when I finally stepped back into visibility, it felt like I'd traded one cage for another. 3 months after the separation, I attended a charity gala, the kind of event I'd avoided for years, the kind where people wore their wealth and success like armor. I went because the arts center was being honored, because my name was attached, because visibility meant showing up. He was there, standing across the room with a woman I didn't recognize. Younger, polished, laughing at something he said with her hand on his arm. He saw me immediately. I watched his face change, recognition, then pain, then something like panic. He excused himself from the woman and walked toward me. I considered leaving, slipping out before he arrived. But I stayed, stood there in my grandmother's pearls, and a dress that cost more than his monthly salary, and waited. You look, he started, then stopped. You look like yourself. This has always been myself. You just never looked. I know. I'm trying to. He gestured vaguely. I'm trying to build something new. Move forward. She's helping me see things differently. Good, I said. Meant it. I heard about the arts center, about the advisory board position. You're doing incredible things. I was always doing incredible things. You wanted me to do them where people could see. He flinched. I was wrong. About everything. Yes. We stood there in silence for a moment. Around us, people in expensive clothes made expensive conversation about expensive things. Everything visible. Everything on display. Everything impressive. Are you happy? He asked quietly. I thought about that question. Really thought about it. I don't know yet. But I'm free. That's worth something. He nodded. Started to say something else, then stopped. Walked away back to the woman who was young and polished and probably had no idea who she was looking at when she looked at him. I left the gala early, went home to my smaller apartment, took off my grandmother's pearls, sat in the darkness by the window. My phone buzzed. Message from the arts center director. Another opportunity, another board position, another chance to be visible and impressive and recognized. I didn't answer. Just sat there thinking about my grandmother's advice, about 6 years of invisibility, about the price of being seen, and I realized something that made my throat tight. The revenge wasn't making him lose me. The revenge was making him watch me become exactly what he said he wanted, and realizing too late that he'd already had it, that he'd held something priceless and convinced himself it was worthless. But that wasn't the end of it, because there was still one more thing nobody knew, one more piece of the situation that was about to detonate in ways none of them could predict. And it was going to change everything. The thing nobody knew about my grandmother's portfolio was that it included something unusual, not just properties and bonds and storage facilities. She'd invested early, back in the 1970s, in medical patents. Specifically, diagnostic equipment patents that had seemed worthless at the time, but became foundational to an entire industry. Those patents generated royalties. Quiet, consistent royalties that flowed into accounts I barely monitored because the amounts were significant enough to be automatic. One of those patents covered technology used in cardiac monitoring equipment, the kind of equipment used in basically every hospital, every clinic, every medical facility across the country. And one of the companies paying those royalties, the biggest one, the market leader, was the same company my husband's firm had just signed as their largest client ever. He'd mentioned it 6 months before we separated. Came home excited, almost vibrating with energy. We landed the healthcare account, the big one. This is going to change everything for us. I'd smiled, congratulated him, made dinner to celebrate. Never mentioned that us included me in ways he couldn't imagine. The company paid me $400,000 annually in patent royalties, had been paying my grandmother before me, would continue paying whoever inherited after me. The contract was iron tight, negotiated by lawyers who'd been dead for 20 years but whose work still held. When I started making calls after the bedroom conversation, after he moved out, one of those calls was to my patent attorney, a woman in her 60s who'd taken over my grandmother's legal affairs and treated them like sacred trust. "I want to know my options," I told her. She was quiet for a long moment. "Then, you're asking if you can terminate the licensing agreement, can I?" "Technically, yes. There's a clause allowing termination with 12 months' notice if certain conditions are met. But Calla, that would devastate their production line. They've built their entire manufacturing process around that patent. Finding alternative technology would take them years and cost them hundreds of millions. What would happen to their stock price?" Another pause. "It would collapse. Investors would panic. The company would likely face lawsuits from shareholders, from clients, from everyone who'd been promised stability. And the sales teams working with them would lose their biggest account overnight. The commissions alone, we're talking millions in lost revenue." I thanked her and hung up. Sat with that information for 3 days, turning it over in my mind like a stone I couldn't quite put down. I didn't want to destroy a company. Hundreds of people worked there. People who had nothing to do with my marriage. People with families and mortgages and lives that depended on their paychecks. But I wanted him to understand something. Wanted him to feel the ground disappear beneath his feet the way I had when he told me I wasn't impressive enough. Wanted him to realize that the success he thought he'd built, the career he was so proud of, existed in an ecosystem I'd been quietly sustaining without him ever knowing. So I made a different call, to the CEO of the medical equipment company. A man named something forgettable who'd sent me polite annual letters about royalty payments but whom I'd never actually spoken to. "I'd like to discuss the patent licensing agreement," I said when his assistant finally put me through. His voice changed immediately, became cautious, alert. "Is there a problem with the payments? Our records show everything current." "The payments are fine. I want to discuss terms. Specifically, I'm considering whether to renew when the current agreement cycle ends. That's not for another 8 years. I'm aware. I'm planning ahead." Silence. Then, carefully, "What would it take to ensure renewal?" "I want transparency. Complete transparency about how the technology is being used, who your clients are, what applications you're developing, quarterly. Reports sent directly to me, not filtered through attorneys. And I want a seat in advisory meetings when strategic decisions are being made about the technology. That's highly unusual. So is inheriting patent rights to technology that generates $400,000 annually. I'm interested in being more involved. If that's not acceptable, I'll need to explore other options." More silence. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing, panicking slightly. "We can arrange that," he said finally. "When would you like to start?" "Immediately." starting with a full breakdown of your current client list and the sales team servicing those accounts. He agreed. Sent me the information within 3 days. A spreadsheet with hundreds of names, companies, account values, and the sales representatives managing each relationship. My husband's name appeared 17 times. His team managed the healthcare division's expansion into regional markets. Their commission structure was tied directly to client retention and growth. I scheduled a meeting with the CEO for the following month. In person, at their headquarters, presented as a routine discussion about the technology's future applications. What I didn't tell anyone was that I was planning to propose a restructuring of their sales division. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would hurt the company, just a strategic shift that would consolidate regional accounts under different management, reassign territories based on performance metrics, eliminate redundancy. Standard business practice. Happens all the time, except it would effectively dissolve my husband's entire division. Not fire anyone, just redistribute them. Break up the team he'd spent 5 years building, scatter them across different departments, remove the collaborative structure that had made them successful. He'd still have a job, still have a salary, but the career trajectory he'd been riding, the success story he told at parties, the impressive achievements he valued so much, all of that would evaporate, and he'd never know why. Would never be able to trace it back to me, to the patent, to the quiet power I'd been holding this entire time. That was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of him not knowing, of his best friend not knowing, of nobody understanding that the ground was already shifting beneath them. In the meantime, visibility kept consuming me. More interview requests, more networking events, more opportunities that all required my presence, my face, my attention. I attended a luncheon for women in finance, sat at a table with 5 other women who talked about breaking barriers and shattering ceilings and making space in rooms that didn't want them. They were impressive, accomplished, genuine in their passion. And I felt like an imposter because I hadn't broken anything, had been handed generational wealth and strategic position and opportunity I'd done nothing to earn. "What's your story?" one of them asked me, smiling warmly. "How did you break into private equity?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't have a story. Not the kind they wanted. Not the kind that involved struggle and perseverance and overcoming odds. Just inheritance and silence and a grandmother who'd built something decades before I was born. "Family business," I said vaguely. "I'm still learning." They nodded, moved on to someone else's more interesting journey. I sat there feeling invisible again, but in a different way. Invisible because I had nothing worth saying. Nothing impressive enough to match their accomplishments. After the luncheon, I walked for an hour through the city, past buildings my grandmother owned, past businesses paying rent into accounts I barely checked, past people living entire lives without knowing I existed in their economic ecosystem. My phone rang. "Unknown number. This is calling from the medical equipment company," a woman's voice said. "Professional? Neutral. We have you scheduled for a facility tour next week before your meeting with leadership. Will you need accommodations arranged?" "No, I'll handle my own travel." "Perfect. We're looking forward to hosting you. The team has prepared extensive materials about the technology applications you requested information on." I thanked her and hung up. Stood there on the sidewalk while people flowed around me like water around a stone. This was it. The machinery was in motion now. 3 weeks until the meeting. 3 weeks until I suggested restructuring that would quietly demolish everything my husband had built. 3 weeks until the revenge nobody would see coming because it looked like routine business practice. My phone buzzed again. Text message from him. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm getting help. Real help. Trying to understand what I did, why I couldn't see you. My therapist thinks I have some childhood stuff around. Achievement and worth that I projected onto you. I'm working on it. I don't expect anything from you. Just wanted you to know I'm trying." I stared at the message for a long time. Read it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. He was trying, getting therapy, doing the work, attempting to understand and change. That should have mattered, should have softened something in me. But all I could think was, now he's trying. After 6 years of making me small, after telling me I wasn't impressive enough, after I made myself visible and valuable in ways he couldn't ignore, now he wanted to grow. I deleted the message without responding. That night, I pulled out my grandmother's letter again, Read those 2 sentences in her perfect handwriting. Stay invisible. The moment people know, they'll want a piece. She'd been right, but she'd also been incomplete, because staying invisible with someone who claimed to love me had meant making myself small enough to fit inside his perception of me. And that was its own kind of disappearing. The medical equipment company sent me preparation materials, 200 pages of technical documentation, market analysis, strategic planning documents. I read all of it over 3 days, making notes, asking questions, learning the business in ways that went far beyond collecting royalty checks. Buried in the documentation was a 5-year projection showing expansion plans, new markets, projected revenue growth. My husband's division was central to those plans. They'd built their entire regional strategy around the structure his team had developed. Dismantling it would hurt more than just him. Would disrupt timelines, confuse clients, create instability that would ripple through the company for months. I called my patent attorney again. "I'm having second thoughts," I said. "About the restructuring suggestion?" "About all of it. The meeting, the involvement, the visibility. Maybe my grandmother was right about staying invisible." She was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, "Your grandmother lived in a different time. She had different battles, different constraints. What worked for her might not be what works for you. But what if I don't want to be visible? What if impressive means exhausting and I'm tired? Then, you make different choices. You can be involved without being visible. You can have power without performance. There's no rule that says you have to do this the way anyone else does." After we hung up, I sat with that, turned it over in my mind like I'd turned over the revenge plan, the restructuring idea, the whole situation. I'd spent 6 years being invisible for him, and the last 3 months being visible for everyone else. Neither version felt like me. Both felt like costumes I was wearing for audiences that didn't actually see me anyway. The revenge I'd planned was perfect, untraceable, devastating, wrapped in legitimate business practice. Would give me exactly what I wanted, him, understanding that I'd always been holding power he never saw. But sitting there in my smaller apartment, in the darkness by the window, I realized something that made my chest ache. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be seen, really seen, by someone who loved me for exactly who I was, invisible or visible, impressive or ordinary, powerful or quiet. And that person wasn't him, had never been him, might not exist at all. So what was the point of making him suffer, when it wouldn't give me what I actually wanted? I pulled out my phone, started typing an email to the CEO of the medical equipment company, explaining that I'd reconsidered my level of involvement, that quarterly reports would be sufficient, that I didn't need to attend strategic meetings or influence organizational structure. My finger hovered over send. Then I remembered the bedroom, the shirt folding, his face when he said those words about me not being impressive enough, the way he'd looked at me like I was, furniture in the home I'd bought. And I deleted the email, wrote a different one instead, confirming the meeting, confirming my interest in being more involved in strategic decisions, confirming that I had thoughts about organizational efficiency that I'd like to discuss. Sent it before I could change my mind again, because maybe I didn't want revenge, but I wanted him to understand that dismissing me, underestimating me, making me small, that had been the biggest mistake of his life, and he was about to find out exactly how big. If you're still listening, drop a comment telling me whether you think I'm doing the right thing, whether revenge is worth it when it doesn't actually heal anything. Subscribe, because what happens at that meeting changes everything in ways nobody expects, not even me. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I flew in the night before, stayed in a hotel near the company headquarters, barely slept, kept running through scenarios in my mind, rehearsing suggestions about organizational restructuring, imagining his face when his career quietly dissolved, and he never understood why. The CEO met me in the lobby himself, tall, gray-haired, the kind of practiced warmth that came from decades of client management. We shook hands and he led me through security, up elevators, down hallways with that corporate sameness that made every floor look identical. "We're grateful for this opportunity to show you our operation," he said as we walked. "Your grandmother was instrumental in our early development. We've always regretted not having more direct relationship with your family. She preferred distance," I said. "Smart woman. Though we're pleased you're taking a more active interest." He opened a door into a large meeting room. And that's when everything stopped. Because sitting at that table, looking like he'd been punched in the stomach, was my husband. Our eyes met. His face went completely white. "I thought you should meet some of our key team members," the CEO said, oblivious to the sudden tension. "This is our regional sales director. He's been crucial to our expansion strategy." My husband stood slowly. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "We've met," I said quietly. The CEO looked between us, confused. "Oh, you know each other. We're married," my husband said. His voice sounded hollow. "We're married. Are married." I don't. Understanding dawned on the CEO's face. He looked at me, then at my husband, then back at me. I wasn't aware of the connection. "Neither was he," I said. "Until recently." We stood there in horrible silence. 3 other people were in the room, team members my husband worked with, people I didn't know. They sat frozen, clearly understanding they were witnessing something intensely personal. "Perhaps we should reschedule," the CEO started. "No," I said. "We're here. Let's have the meeting." I sat down. After a long moment, everyone else sat too. My husband looked like he might be sick. The presentation started. Technology applications, market expansion, revenue projections. I listened, took notes, asked technical questions that had nothing to do with sales divisions or restructuring or revenge, just genuine questions about the patents, the equipment, the future development. My husband didn't speak, just sat there staring at his hands, his face gray. 40 minutes in, during a discussion about manufacturing improvements, he suddenly stood up. "Excuse me," he said, walked out of the room without looking at anyone. The CEO glanced at me, uncertain. "Should we continue?" I said. "Please." They continued. But the energy had shifted. Everyone knew something massive had just happened. Nobody understood what. The meeting ended an hour later. The CEO thanked me, said they'd prepare the quarterly reports I'd requested, asked if I needed anything else. "Can I use this room for a few minutes?" I asked. "Privately?" He understood, ushered everyone else out, closed the door behind them. I sat alone in that corporate meeting room, surrounded by presentation materials about patents my grandmother had secured 50 years ago, thinking about the revenge I'd planned and the man who'd just walked out looking destroyed. My phone buzzed. Text from him. "Are you still here?" I typed back. "Conference room B." 5 minutes later, the door opened. He stepped inside, closed it carefully behind him. Didn't come closer, just stood near the door like he was afraid to approach. "You own the patents," he said. "Not a question. My grandmother did. I inherited them. The company pays you royalties. 400,000 annually." He flinched. "My biggest client. The account that made my career. You've been..." He stopped, shook his head. "This whole time? Yes. You came here to destroy me, to take it away." I looked at him, really looked at him, saw the fear in his eyes, the panic, the understanding that his entire professional life existed because I'd allowed it to. "I considered it," I said honestly. "Planned it. Was going to suggest restructuring that would dissolve your division, scatter your team, eliminate everything you've built, make it look like routine business practice, so you'd never know it was me. Why didn't you?" "Because I realized something. Destroying your career wouldn't make me feel better. Wouldn't heal anything. Wouldn't change the fact that you looked at me and saw someone not impressive enough. Taking away your success won't give me back the 6 years I spent being invisible." He slid down the wall, sat on the floor with his head in his hands. "I didn't know any of it. The money, the properties, the patents. You never told me. You never asked. In 6 years, you never once asked detailed questions about where things came from. You just accepted that good things happened around you because you thought you deserved them. I was arrogant, blind, stupid. Yes." He looked up at me, tears on his face. "What do you want from me? What can I possibly do to fix this?" I stood up, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot where employees were coming and going, living normal lives, unaware that in this room everything was breaking apart. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can do. Because the problem wasn't that you didn't know about my money. The problem was that you decided I wasn't valuable when you thought I had nothing. You measured my worth by what you could see and show off, and when that didn't look impressive enough, you told me you could do better. I was wrong. Being wrong isn't the same as understanding why you were wrong. You're not upset that you hurt me. You're upset that you lost something valuable. There's a difference. He stood up slowly. So what happens now? You destroy my career anyway? Take everything? No. I'm leaving your career exactly where it is. You'll keep this account, keep your team, keep building your success. The royalty payments continue like they always have. Nothing changes professionally. Confusion crossed his face. Then why did you come here? Because I needed you to know. Needed you to understand that every achievement you're proud of, every client meeting, every commission check from this account, all of it exists in an ecosystem I created. You'll wake up every day knowing your career stands on foundation I built. And you'll never be able to forget that the woman you said wasn't impressive enough is the reason you have anything to be proud of at all. His face crumpled. Oh, that's crueler than just destroying me. Maybe, but it's honest. You get to keep your success. You just have to live with knowing where it really came from. I picked up my bag, headed for the door. Wait, he said desperately. Please, there has to be something. Some way to make this right. I turned back, looked at him standing there in his professional clothes in the building, where he'd built his career on technology my grandmother had invested in before he was born. You want to make it right? Stop measuring people's worth by what impresses other people. Stop confusing visibility with value. Stop mistaking performance for substance. And maybe someday, with someone else, you'll actually see the person standing in front of you. I left him there, walked out of that building, got in my rental car, drove to the airport. On the flight home, I pulled out my grandmother's letter one more time. Read those 2 sentences until I had them memorized in ways that went deeper than words. She'd told me to stay invisible because she knew visibility came with cost. But she'd also stayed invisible out of protection, out of fear of what people would take. I'd spent 6 years invisible out of love that turned into diminishment, and 3 months visible out of anger that turned into exhaustion. Maybe the answer wasn't choosing between invisible and visible. Maybe it was. Choosing when to be seen and by whom. Being selective with my presence instead of hoarding it or broadcasting it. The medical equipment company sent quarterly reports, like promised. I read them. Asked questions, stayed involved without attending meetings or making suggestions, maintained connection without performance. The Arts Center thrived. I attended opening night, gave a brief speech, then stepped back and let the director run it. My name on the building, but my presence in the shadows. The business journal profile led to other interviews, other opportunities. I turned down most of them, accepted a few that aligned with things my grandmother would have cared about. Learned to say no without explanation. 6 months after that meeting, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten on expensive paper. From him. I almost threw it away without reading. Stood at my mailbox for 5 full minutes holding it, debating. Finally opened it. I'm writing this because my therapist suggested it, but I'm sending it because I think you deserve to know. I quit my job, left the company, left the division I built, left the career that existed because of you. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't walk into that building every day knowing what I know. My best friend asked why I'd walk away from the best position I'd ever had. I told him the truth, that it was never really mine to begin with. I'm working at a smaller firm now. Less money, less prestige, less everything. But it's mine. I built it from nothing, with no invisible support, no foundations I didn't create. It's probably stupid. It's definitely humbling, but it's honest. I don't expect you to forgive me or respond to this. I just wanted you to know that you were right, about all of it. And I'm trying to become someone who actually sees people, instead of just what they can do for me. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I hope someone sees you the way you deserve to be seen all along. No signature, just his. Handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards and love notes early in our marriage, when things still felt real. I sat with that letter for hours. Read it multiple times, trying to figure out how I felt. Eventually I realized I felt nothing. Not satisfaction that he'd quit, not sympathy for his struggle, not anger or grief or relief, just nothing. He'd become someone from my past, someone who'd taught me hard lessons but no longer occupied space in my present. I filed the letter away in a box with our marriage certificate and divorce papers that were processing, documents proving things that used to matter. A year after the separation, the divorce finalized. Simple, uncontested. I kept everything that was mine, which was basically everything. He kept his new job and whatever growth he was claiming to have achieved. The day the papers were official, I took off my grandmother's pearls and put them back in their case. Wore a necklace I bought for myself instead. Something new, something chosen, something that had no history except the moment I decided I wanted it. My phone rang that evening. Unknown number. I answered. This is calling from the Women in Finance organization. We're hosting a mentorship program and wondered if you'd be interested in participating. Not as a speaker, we have enough of those, but as someone who meets one-on-one with younger women trying to navigate wealth and privacy and family legacy. Off the record, unofficial, just conversations. I thought about the luncheon where I'd felt like an imposter, about having nothing impressive to say, no struggle story to share. I'd like that, I said. When do we start? They paired me with a woman named something simple and real. 26, inherited her father's manufacturing business after he died, drowning in expectations and visibility, and people wanting pieces of her. We met for coffee. I told her about my grandmother's letter, about 6 years of hiding, about the man who said I wasn't impressive enough. What did you do? She asked, leaning forward. I showed him the truth, let him see what he'd missed. Then I walked away. Did it feel good? I considered that. It felt necessary. Not good, not bad, just necessary, like setting something down I'd been carrying too long. She nodded slowly. Everyone keeps telling me I need to be visible, to take up space, make myself known, prove I deserve what I inherited. But I don't want that. I want to just do the work without performing it. Then, do that, I said simply. Your grandmother gave you permission to be invisible. I'm giving you permission to choose. Visible when it matters, invisible when it protects you. There's no rule that says you have to do this the way anyone else does. Her eyes filled with tears. Nobody's ever said that before. We talked for 2 hours. About legacy and pressure and the weight of carrying wealth you didn't earn. About men who measure worth by visibility and the cost of making yourself small. About choosing your own path even when it disappoints people who think they know better. When we finished, she hugged me, fierce and tight and grateful. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. I walked home through the city, past buildings my grandmother owned, past my old apartment building where I'd folded shirts and heard words that broke everything open, past the coffee shop where I'd met someone who couldn't see me. My phone buzzed. Text from the mentorship coordinator. She said the conversation changed her life. Thank you for participating. Are you available for another match next month? I typed back. Yes. Because maybe that was the answer. Maybe impressive didn't mean visible to everyone. Maybe it meant visible to the people who needed to see you, invisible to the people who didn't deserve access, and wise enough to know the difference. My grandmother had built her empire in silence. My husband had wanted me visible and shining. I'd spent a year trying to figure out which version was right. Turned out neither was. Turned out the right version was mine to create. Visible on purpose, invisible by choice, powerful regardless. The revenge I'd planned was making him lose everything. The revenge I'd executed was making him understand what he'd lost. But the real victory wasn't in his suffering, or understanding, or growth. It was in me finally understanding my own worth. Not measured by what he could see, not proven by what strangers recognized, not validated by visibility or invisibility, just inherent, unchanging, mine. I went home to my smaller apartment, made tea in my grandmother's cup, sat by the window, watching the city move below. Somewhere out there, he was building a career from nothing, learning lessons he should have learned years ago. His best friend was running a consultancy, funded by money he'd never acknowledged. The medical equipment company was thriving on patents secured by a woman who'd known the value of strategic invisibility. And I was here, not invisible, not performing visibility, just existing in the space I'd chosen, seen by people I'd selected, powerful in ways that didn't require announcement. My grandmother was right about staying invisible, and she was wrong, because the real lesson wasn't about hiding, it was about choosing who gets to see you, choosing what you let define you, choosing your own measure of worth and refusing to let anyone else hold the ruler. He'd said I wasn't impressive enough. Turned out the problem wasn't my lack of impressiveness. It was his inability to recognize value when it wasn't performing for his benefit, and now he knew, would spend the rest of his life knowing, that the woman he'd dismissed, the wife he'd told to be more, the person he'd made invisible, she'd been holding everything all along. That was the revenge. Not destruction, not suffering, just truth, just him living every day with the knowledge of what he'd failed to see when he had the chance, and me, living every day, knowing I didn't need him to see me anymore, didn't need anyone's recognition to know my worth, didn't need to be visible or invisible, impressive or ordinary, just needed to be honest, with myself, about who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. Everything else was just noise. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever been told you weren't enough by someone who never bothered to really look, leave a comment, sharing your story. Subscribe, because there are more stories like this, more truths about the price of being seen and the power of choosing yourself. And remember, impressive isn't something you prove to people who can't see you. It's something you know about yourself regardless of who's watching.